everyone, it's Kelsey at Scrapbook.com, and I'm here again today to challenge you to make an altered mini album cover. I'm going to show you using just a few embellishments and a mini album from Graphic 45 along with their great line of steampunk papers, just how to alter something fun and funky in a few minutes. We're going to start with our Graphic 45 Staples Collection envelope album. And this is just a basic plain spiral bound set of 6 envelopes. And what I've done is I have started sort of altering the insides of these, and I've just added the Graphic 45 steampunk line to some of the pages. I do intend obviously to go back and add additional and then altering, adding some photos, some embellishments, things like that. But you can see each of these envelopes basically creates a pocket, and in the pocket I've decided to make my album about the 29 things in my 29th year. So I've done things I love, and things I dislike, and I've filled it out and I've tucked it into my pocket. So what I'm going to do today, however, is show you just how to alter the front of the album. And I will later upload this entire album to my gallery online at Scrapbook.com so that you can see the finished product. So to get started, I'm going to just pull out that altered card that I made and set it aside. We don't need that and we don't want it in the way. And then to get started on our album cover, I've basically just picked out a few of my favorite embellishments, also from Graphic 45, and a few other things from my stash. So I want to make the focal point this really cool vintage doorknob from Graphic 45, and it's also going to act as my album closure. What I've done is I've taken a piece of embroidery floss, I've threaded it through this album grommet, and basically I'm just going to stick it around my knob once the knob is adhered, and I've tied a little bow so it just never comes undone, and I've dotted it with a little bit of matte accents, again just to keep the bow from coming apart. But that way that's going to act as my album closure once all of this is done. Now, your album will come with this thicker strand of string, but for me it was just too much, too cumbersome. I just took it off, threw it aside, and used instead, again, that embroidery floss. So that would be step 1, is to figure out how you want to close your album. All right. Then obviously, in true Graphic 45 and vintage style, I really want to distress some of my elements. So I'm going to pull in a few of the Staples stickers and some of the steampunk pattern paper, as well as some additional embellishments from my stash, some Maya Road bingo pieces, and just some old funky alphabet letters. Things I've collected over the years. These are extremely old, but I still love their style. I think they're really vintage. So that's what I'm going to be working with today. So to get started, I cut a piece of the Graphic 45 steampunk paper down to a size that fits on the front of the album, like so, and I rounded the corners. And all I'm going to do now is take my Ranger ink, inker, some Tim Holtz Distress ink, and I'm just going to highlight the edges with just a little bit of a black shadow. Okay. Then I'm going to just adhere this to the front of my album cover. And I'm going to push it right up against the rings here, the spiral, because my flap is going to come over and cover any of this extra space over here. Okay. Then I'm also going to add a couple of vintage stickers. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to barely stick these down on my nonstick mat, because again, I want to just run some ink over the edges of these. So I'm just picking out a couple that I like and that I'm going to layer with think that'll do it for now. And then I'm just going to go again. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and stick these down randomly. Because again, remember, I'm going to cover up a lot of this with my doorknob. So I just kind of want to have some fun with where I might place these, where they might kind of peekaboo out. There's not really a science to it. You can put them on straight, you can put them on crooked. I just encourage you to have a little fun. You can overlap, you can not overlap. Again, just remember they are going to get covered somewhat, so it's not really critical where they end up. Okay, now for your metal knob, this basically comes in 6 pieces. You get 4 mini brads, which are going to go into your small holes on either side. And you get 1 large knob, which is actually separate. It starts out separately in the packaging, so you can adhere it however you'd like. Obviously, I'm going to put it in the knob slot and bend back the brad closure. It'll stay there pretty well, but what I'm also going to do is adhere this down directly onto my album cover with my matte or glossy accents or diamond glaze or some type of adhesive that really concretes it to the front of the album, because you don't want something that's fairly heavy to be falling off your album. And we all know sometimes we get a little gunky. So I just take a paper clip, I open up one side of it, and I stick it down through and make sure that my adhesive can really flow through that nozzle, because sometimes it just gets a little bit stuck. And for right now, obviously I want to avoid all the holes, but I am going to put a little bit of this right underneath my brad prongs so that those get really stuck when I press down, and then I'm just going to kind of go all over this around the outside edges. Oops, I told you not to go through the hole and then I did. Try not to do that. This stuff does dry clear, so again, mistakes are not really mistakes. So once I've got my glue on here, I've let it actually get a little bit tacky, and then I'm just going to put it right down. And remember, I want my knob to go closest to my closure, but again, I'm going to back it right up to the edge of my spirals and set it down. And then I would let this adhere and really bond to your paper for at least 5 minutes so that you get a good firm hold and you know that it's not going to come off. All right, now that we've let this dry and this is on here really, really tight and it's not going anywhere, now we have the challenge of getting these brad fasteners into each of these holes just to give it that polished, finished look. And I'm actually really impressed with how open these pockets do become. So I'm going to go ahead and stick my hand down in here to kind of create, so that I don't punch all the way through the pocket, obviously, to the other side. I want to just get in there as much as I can. And then I'm going to use my paper piercer, and by warping this pocket a little bit, I'm going to just be able to barely punch through without ruining the opposite side. Now my hand is in there, so obviously I'm poking myself in the finger, so you want to go really slow and be really careful, but your finger will help as a guide, or if you have a piece of foam that you can put down in there to pierce these holes, just so that you don't puncture through that opposite side. Okay, and then you're going to take and insert your brads that come with your doorknob kit into your holes. And obviously you're going to just have to finesse sort of separating them behind closed doors, if you will, because you really are going to have a hard time seeing what you're doing. But again, these brads are fairly pliable and they should eventually just go right down. There we go. So now that the hard part's done, you may just want to go back with your adhesive runner and re-adhere some of your corners that came up while you're trying to stick your hand into your envelope there. But other than that, everything remained intact. My brads, excuse me, are now flattened inside my envelope with no damage to the opposite side. You can see where I've got my pattern paper already on. You can do this alternatively, where you don't put your pattern paper on and you pierce your holes first. Your pattern paper will then cover the holes that you've made, but you really don't want those brads to go all the way through, or you won't be able to slide your card down your envelope. Okay, so all that's really left now is our personal anecdotes, the things we want to add. So again, my album is about 29 things that I want to do or have done in my 29 years. So it's sort of a self-reflection, a chance to journal, and some reminders, you know, some personal reminders to myself. So to title this, again, I just found some vintage bits and pieces, mainly stickers, and a couple of things that I'll just adhere down in some sort of fashion. And I do like to lay it out first so I can kind of tell where things will end up. And keep in mind that while you're doing this, you do want to remain aware of where your flap comes for your closure so that you're not spilling over into that area and hiding your titling. So to put my bingo numbers down, I'm just going to return to my matte or glossy accents, and we'll just get some glue on the back side. And I just want to kind of put it right over here in the corner. And then I'm just going to follow with my stickers. And I don't really care if these are perfectly straight up and down, so I might even try to skew them a little bit. Once you have your top portion done, then you can move on to the bottom portion of your title. Again, I have some stickers that I'm just sort of laying out. I want to make sure that I get the correct spacing and that I don't run into my closure over here. So 29 things in my 29th year. So I went ahead and just cut out all the alphabet letters that I'm going to use. I found some kind of vintage browns, creams. Oops. I'm going to switch these two so I get a little bit of color variation there. And then again, I'm just going to make sure that my album closure isn't going to bump up here. And one of the ways to do that is to actually start at the back. Once you have everything lined up and you know that your spelling is correct, your placement is fairly good, you can just start working from the back of your letters here. So I'm going to start where I know that this closes with my letter R. And again, I'm gonna just kind of scatter these letters. I'm gonna hug them up tight to one another. I don't really want them to be in a straight uniform line. So now that all of my alphabet letters and bingo numbers and everything's adhered down, the only thing I would suggest for some of these to sort of highlight them is just to grab your ink pad back out and your ink blending tool and just kind of hit your letters once. And it kind of just creates a shadow. It gives them a little bit of an antiqued feel. And sometimes they pop just a little bit better. And even these bingo numbers up here, obviously they're blacker on the edges so you can't really see, but I might get some black ink on those, I'm sorry, domino numbers, not bingo numbers. There you go. Okay, and then all we have left are some very finishing touches. Obviously, since this is a doorknob, I would love to put a key on here somewhere. So Graphic 45 Staples has this cute little key sticker. I'm just gonna poke out all the excess pieces with my paper piercer here. And I'm just going to stick the key down somewhere where it makes sense and just kind of overlap. But basically you're just reinforcing at that point the message. You know, this is a doorknob, it's got a lock, it's got a key, kind of draws the eye into the center of your album. Then what I've also done is out of some of the steampunk paper, I've cut this butterfly. I just went ahead and hand cut it with some small micro tip scissors. And then I did put my matte accents all over it, which kind of gives it a soft finish, of course, but also makes it pliable so that I can mold the wings and sort of force them in an outward direction. And I can bend the body up to give my album now some dimension. And I want to just adhere my beautiful butterfly somewhere in the neighborhood over here where my album is looking a little bit neglected. And to do that, again, to get the dimension, I'm going to use these Pop Dot self-adhesive squares, but obviously this square is not going to fit on this butterfly without showing. So I'm just going to snip it right in half, and that's going to give me a little bit more freedom to place it on the back of my butterfly. Once it's on, again, you just give your wings a bend into the shape that you had already created, and you come back to your album closure that we created at the very beginning, and we're just going to untwist it a little bit here. We're going to wrap it around our knob, and voila, we have a completed altered mini album cover.